More than 10,000 human trafficking cases were reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline in 2021, involving more than 16,000 victims. You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. Those shocking statistics are likely only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to human trafficking. Today, we're joined by the Attorney General for the state of Kansas to talk a little bit more about issues we're seeing here. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. And those national numbers that you reported include a significant number of cases of human trafficking in Kansas. In that same year, there were 274 reports of human trafficking incidents or scenarios in Kansas. And then of those that were confirmed, there were 138 likely victims in Kansas in just 1 year. And I think many people may not recognize A, that human trafficking is such a big problem, but B, these numbers, over 100 victims in Kansas in one single year. It's a very real issue. It's something that is concealed by the perpetrators, but it's going on all around us.
And I have some more stats from the National Human Trafficking Hotline here. Of those 10,000 cases reported in 2021, the majority, more than 7,000, involved sex trafficking. And as you mentioned, about 274 signals that came into the hotline were from Kansas. 68 of those signals were from victims or survivors of human trafficking. What is the Attorney General's office seeing now when it comes to this issue? In the past year, what changes have you noticed?
Well, first of all, we have ongoing cases right now. So the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, which is under my office, is conducting 4 active investigations right now. I can't, obviously, for obvious reasons, can't share the details of those investigations, but it is a current and continuing problem in Kansas. This is a situation that has been around for several years now, for a significant number of years now, but I think public awareness is gradually increasing. More and more people are hearing about the problem of human trafficking, where individuals are put into some form of servitude against their will, and quite often it involves prostitution or pornography. If people are not familiar with it, they may have heard about, and I would urge them to see the movie A Sound of Freedom, which is in theaters now. It provides a vivid window into this really troubling, horrifying world of human trafficking.
And what do you think makes Kansas unique when it comes to this issue?
Well, I don't know if we're unique, but we have certain vulnerabilities. One is that we are a transportation hub in the country. We have I-35 coming up from the Mexican border from southern Texas, and then we have I-70, which is a fairly well-established drug corridor across the United States. And so oftentimes you will see human trafficking being perpetrated by cartels, by people who are involved in the trafficking of drugs or involved in the trafficking of all sorts of illegal products and contraband across the international border. So we are unfortunately at a place where human trafficking can and does exist. Another factor has been the recent growth of marijuana cultivation and farms in Oklahoma. Law enforcement is reporting that with those marijuana farms has sometimes come human trafficking, drug trafficking, and other illegal activities. So there are a number of reasons why we are exposed to this problem.
Now, the Kansas Human Trafficking Advisory Board was established in 2010 to explore what we're seeing in Kansas. They take a 4-pronged approach, which is often cited in tackling this issue. That includes prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnerships. Let's start with prevention. In some cases, this has leaned toward educating the public through campaigns. What prevention tactics does Kansas currently have in place to address human trafficking?
Well, one was just put into place by the legislature, and upon the recommendation of the Human Trafficking Advisory Board, which is under the Attorney General's office as well, and that is giving information to the people who are most likely to see it. So a lot of human trafficking involves minors, and one of the requirements of this new Kansas law is that teachers receive education on some of the indicators of human trafficking. Another area where human trafficking sometimes appears is with respect to highways and corridors of transportation. So commercial driver's license holders, truckers, are being required to take some educational material to learn about the indicators of human trafficking. Also, we tend to see it in the foster program or with runaways, where juveniles are particularly vulnerable. Those people are often the most vulnerable to be exploited and to be, captured or brought into human trafficking networks. And so just increasing awareness and increasing education about the fact that this does exist and what the risks are and who's at a higher level of risk. One of the things we've seen is that people are at a higher level of risk if someone in their household has a drug addiction problem. People who themselves have a drug addiction problem may be at a higher level of risk. People who are in poverty and are seeking money to survive and become likely prey for human traffickers. And then, of course, those who are illegally in the United States are particularly vulnerable to human trafficking for multiple reasons, because sometimes the traffickers themselves are also the cartels or the coyotes that brought them into the United States. They may owe those entities money. Those entities may threaten to turn them over to law enforcement and advise law enforcement of their illegal status. So those individuals are particularly vulnerable, and as a result, oftentimes are a large percentage of the victims of human trafficking.
Thank you, Chris. And coming up, we're exploring the other part of the state's four-pronged approach, protection. That's up next. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
It's our biggest sale of the year at the Floor Project. It's so big, we can't fit all the deals into this commercial. Just scan this code to see this week's biggest deals on real wood floors, our best-selling waterproof floors, carpet, and more.
Scan and save!
For incredible financing, our best yet. Plus, installations half price on our most popular waterproof floors. Get into the Floor Project for our biggest sale of the year.
Can you believe it is already back to school season? We know that all of you parents out there are rushing around in preparation for the new school year. We want to remind you of one of the most important things you can do for your children before they head back to the classroom, which is making sure they are up to date on all of their vaccinations, including their COVID vaccinations. You can even have their eyes checked and make sure their smiles are ready for school pictures. So make sure your kids are protected by making a vaccination appointment with Grace Med. Call 785-861-8800 to make an appointment.
Why should you choose Washburn?
Ask an Ichabod.
For opportunity.
For community.
For choices. And value.
We help you succeed.
And hit your stride.
It's a place to fit in and stand out.
Where you can find your calling.
And lifelong friends.
Where together we grow.
We achieve.
We succeed. And together we strive.
We have all been touched by the support of a caring nurse, a professional who is there to help in trying times. 27 KSNT and Baker University are passionate about the services nurses provide. We want to recognize the heroic work that they do every day for their patients and their families. And we need your help. Visit KSNT.com to nominate a deserving Kansas nurse. Each month, a winner will be highlighted on TV and online. Nominate that special nurse who has made a difference in your life. Sponsored by Baker University.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung here with Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach to talk about human trafficking protections. Chris, protection from human trafficking can extend from the national level to what people are able to do in their own community. So what are some of the protections in place in Kansas, and where are some areas where the state could improve, do you think?
Well, there's protection in the sense of preventing it in the first place and detecting it, and then there's also protection after it's discovered. And the Human Trafficking Advisory Board, which is coordinated by the Attorney General's office, tries to bring together all of these resources. So you have law enforcement on the advisory board, but you also have organizations that provide assistance to the victims of human trafficking. So when they come forward or when they are discovered, when they are rescued from this situation, oftentimes they are in need of economic help, they're in need of a place to live, they're in need of all sorts of care. And so there are private organizations out there, there are public resources to help those private organizations, and of course there are public agencies that can help as well. So the protection is really important because these individuals truly are victims of a horrific crime, and they need all sorts of help, both in being discovered and in being helped after discovery.
What would you say is one of the biggest struggles for law enforcement when it comes to human trafficking?
Probably the fact that it's occurring in plain sight. It's going on, people may be trafficked on public buses. They are routinely trafficked on public, commercial aircraft. And it's the traffickers are gifted or talented at keeping their crime quiet, at keeping the victim from doing anything about it. And so it's detecting it is often a great difficulty, but that is being resolved in part by the human trafficking hotline. And if people see any human trafficking or think there might be something that looks like human trafficking, they should go to the Attorney General's website and click on the link on victim services, and then you'll see the human trafficking information below that, and they can get to the hotline and also report things to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
And we know education is also an important factor, as we mentioned earlier. How can the community participate in working with law enforcement or informing people in their own neighborhood about the warning signs of human trafficking?
You know, there's a lot of information that is actually being posted now in gas stations, truck stops, police stations. I think if people want to look at that information and then, digest some of it and report it to their associates at work, their friends, whatever, people in the neighborhood, that's one way to do it. If you don't have access to one of those signs or don't see one, go to the website of the Attorney General, and again, go to victims and then human trafficking, and you can find lots of information there.
And you're saying that the Attorney General's website has some resources, but then what other ways is the Attorney General's office getting involved in the community to help with education?
Well, of course, the education is being done through these various entities and because of a requirement by the Kansas legislature. We're coordinating a lot of this, and so our role isn't just in educating, it's also in investigating. And ultimately we assist in the prosecuting too. So we do provide some of the educational materials, but we rely on other entities, and the legislature has commissioned those other entities, like teachers, who are in contact with so many people, to help disseminate that information.
What are some other ways, do you think, that the Attorney General's office could get involved, or maybe some initiatives that you're looking at?
Well, I think the most important one is devoting resources to the problem. I mean, this is a crime that is occurring, and as I mentioned, we have 4 active cases already being worked in the Kansas Bureau of Investigation right now, and that's just at the present time. There are past cases as well. Devoting the attention to it, and that means devoting resources and devoting the time of officers and the energy of the agency to it.
And up next, how is human trafficking being prosecuted in Kansas? We'll tell you after the break. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
You think knowledge is a powerful weapon? Here, you'll have plenty of ammo. We turn intelligence into tactical success. Explore more than 200 careers at GoArmy.com.
Save on new windows, save on new siding, save on both. It's our Summer of Love sale. Click.
Mental health is about emotional health and brain health.
Healthy children and families, and a healthy Kansas.
Go to acmhck.org to find your local community mental health center.
Doughboys Pizzeria, a family restaurant in North Topeka, serving fresh pizza with our signature sauce, award-winning wings, awesome appetizers, and desserts, with outdoor dining and entertainment. Call or order online at doughboys.pizza.
New Sound visitors, they become our family because that's the least you deserve. Listening to loved ones, that's a gift. New Sound will help you give that gift to your loved ones because that's the least they deserve.
It's the back to school event at the Mattress Hub, and we're educating you for the best night's sleep. Find Sealy mattresses starting at $299 or save up to $300 on the best brands in sleep. Sleep well and save big. Only at the Mattress Hub.
Save on all your favorite brands from Vanderbilt's. End of season sale. Get men's full blue shorts starting at $9.99. Just in time for back to school, new arrivals of Hey Dude, Wendy and Wally styles. Wolverine I-90 work boots available in soft or safety toe, your choice, $109.99. Save $34 on Wolverine overpass boots. Sale price, $129.99.
Work boots center, Vanderbilt.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics, where we're getting answers from Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach on human trafficking. Chris, in order to obtain a trafficking conviction, state laws in most instances require that prosecutors prove traffickers compelled their victims into a labor or sexual servitude. Laws include the elements of force, fraud, and coercion, but the definition can vary from state to state. What's on the books in Kansas when it comes to human trafficking?
Actually, as it happens, the Kansas legislature just revised and updated our law on human smuggling, which is the way it's termed in Kansas, in the criminal part of the code, which is House Bill 2350. And so it does involve individuals being trafficked or, moved into and through the state. It does also focus in particular, there are several facets of it, several types of human smuggling, but one involves trafficking individuals who are illegally present in the United States, because that is such a common, those people are victims of trafficking in a disproportionate number of cases. And it does involve the similar elements of being used for profit by the traffickers.
Are you saying that human smuggling and human trafficking have a very close definition?
Yeah, they do. I mean, technically human trafficking, human smuggling is a subset of human trafficking. Usually the individuals are smuggled as part of being trafficked. But there are some cases, for example, where a person, and these are really disturbing cases, where a family member may intentionally put someone that they are related to into a situation in which they are trafficked, and they may not be smuggled across an international border or even across a state line. So not all human trafficking involves human smuggling, but human smuggling, as we define it in Kansas, almost certainly is part of human trafficking.
Now, when we look at the new law that was passed, I know there have been some concerns about how it would be enforced because of the language in the bill being vague. How do you see law enforcement navigating that bill and enforcement?
I don't think the language is vague in the bill. It's pretty clear, and it gives law enforcement some indicators of what the individual, what's happening with the individual, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be the prosecutors who will look at it and say, all right, yes, these are the requirements that are met in the statute. But I think if typically how this would unfold is maybe the Kansas Bureau of Investigation would be looking at a network of human trafficking. Once a sufficient information is collected to move in and stop the trafficking, then local law enforcement would be brought in, and then typically the county prosecutor would have the primary responsibility for prosecuting and would be looking then, okay, do we have all of the elements of the crime met? And sometimes the Attorney General's office is then requested to come in by the county to assist in the prosecution. That typically happens when you have a case that's very large, very complex, or in murder cases in the state of Kansas. So that's how it would unfold, and ultimately the determination of whether the statutory requirements are met is probably going to be made by the county attorney with the assistance of the Attorney General's office. And bear in mind, some of these cases are federal as well. Homeland Security Investigations Unit has devoted a large amount of resources to human trafficking. Congress has focused energy and resources on human trafficking. So in some of these instances, particularly where state lines are crossed or where the international border is crossed, you'll have federal agencies involved as well. And under my office, we have built out a task force of state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies to cooperate with one another, because this really is one of those types of criminal activity that isn't just confined to one town or one area. It tends to have tentacles that cross state boundaries and even international boundaries.
But there are immigration lawyers, there are attorneys that have come out and said this law is vague and it would be hard to prosecute.
I think, well, actually what they've said is that they've basically come up with far-fetched hypotheticals to say, maybe this law could be used to prosecute someone who gives a ride to a construction site of a worker who is illegally in the country. And those hypotheticals don't fit the statute quite clearly. So I think they're trying to create an issue where there is none. I would be very surprised if any of their hypothetical situations ever emerged in the real world in Kansas.
So do you think law enforcement, I guess, would have a clear understanding of that law and how to enforce it?
I think the statute is quite clear.
What are some of the challenges in prosecuting sex trafficking cases, do you think, in Kansas?
Well, it's similar to many crimes in the sense that you have to have witnesses, and more witnesses is better. You have to have, ideally, you would want people who have observed it firsthand. The victim would be one of the best witnesses, of course. So, that's one challenge whenever you have a network like this, especially when it's a network that may have international gangs involved and intimidation involved. So it's a type of criminal activity that can be challenging, to say the least.
All right, coming up next, we're looking at solutions. Law enforcement says partnership is the key. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
The story of Grace Med has always been told through its people, both those who serve and those who it is our honor to serve. We meet at the intersection of compassion and vulnerability, bringing health where there was illness and hope where there was despair. Our patients come to us bearing the weight of living in the margins, and we share the love of Jesus Christ with them by providing compassionate quality health care for all their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Because health restored is always hope renewed. Find hope today by scheduling an appointment with Grace Med.
Talk to people about siding, and talk to people about windows, and talk to people about decking, and it was just beyond me, and I couldn't get it to fit together. And Windows Design came in and they basically put it all together. I would recommend this company to anybody, my neighbors especially, because they've all come over and wanted to see my house. It was a great experience, and the product obviously speaks for itself.
Let us make your dream project become a reality. Call the experts at Window Design and Remodeling. We are your home remodeling specialists.
It's Renewal by Andersen's 28th anniversary, and that means you get to celebrate with an extraordinary offer. For a limited time only, get 28% off your entire project, plus no money down, no interest, and no payments for a whole year. You can cash in on this great deal and remain confident you're getting the best product and service out there.
We have a survey that's sent out after installation, and most of those surveys come back with they love the way the window was sold, the way it was installed, financing that's available, and all the different combinations that are available also.
Renewal by Andersen has spent decades perfecting our patented Fibrex windows, ensuring they'll last for many more years to come.
It doesn't rot, it doesn't peel. Unlike some of the early concepts of composites, they had problems because they rushed them to market. We spent over 20 years developing the Fibrex.
Celebrate our 28th anniversary with 28% off. Call the number on your screen or visit rbabestoffer.com to take advantage of this exclusive offer. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics, where we're diving into human trafficking in Kansas. Chris, we're shifting now to solutions that the state is looking at to combat human trafficking. Partnership here is key. Why is that, and what steps are being taken now to strengthen partnerships in Kansas?
Well, one of the best ways we do that is through the Human Trafficking Advisory Board, which has private entities, law enforcement entities, state agencies that might be involved. You have to bring together all kinds of people who can help, who can get the information out, and who can provide public awareness and information. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and usually the Human Trafficking Advisory Board is the center of where these efforts generate and brings together all of the players at one place. We have a human trafficking specialist at the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. We have an individual in the Office of the Attorney General whose focus is human trafficking. And so we have individuals whose number one job every day is to focus on this particular problem, and then we have this advisory board. One of the things the advisory board's working on right now is improving and expanding the protective services that are available to victims in human trafficking. And then an ongoing project is always awareness, just getting the message out to the public that this is real, it's happening. There are more than 100 victims every year in Kansas of human trafficking. And so the challenge is making people aware of it and helping people become educated so that they can see clues that might indicate human trafficking.
This Human Trafficking Advisory Board, it's been in place for years now. What do you think some of the strides they've made up to now have been?
Well, they've done great work in providing recommendations to the legislature. So I would point to the recently enacted bill concerning requiring teachers and police officers and truck drivers to get this education and looking for certain indices of human trafficking. I think that's a really great achievement, and it's something that will make a difference. I mean, the bottom line is if because of those that teaching and that educational material, if some teacher somewhere sees something, says something to local law enforcement, and then a case is brought and a human trafficking network is stopped and one victim is saved, hey, I would say that that's a great achievement. So just by getting the word out, we can do a lot.
And you said this next step is boosting protective services. So what does that look like?
It's a number of things. The resources that we have, both federal and state money, are significant. And so that means helping agencies that will provide support to the victims of human trafficking once they are rescued from that situation, and helping them, find a job. These individuals may have been working in forced prostitution for years, and so giving them the resources, education, support. It may involve housing. So all of those protective services, we include all of that under the umbrella of protection.
Now, I know human trafficking, despite all of these things that are being put in place, is still a prevalent issue in Kansas. Why do you think we're not seeing as drastic of a decline, even with these efforts in place? And what other partnerships do you think need to be focused on to address what's contributing to the amount of human trafficking cases we're seeing?
It is really discouraging that we're not seeing a decline in human trafficking. And I don't have an answer for why it's not declining. I mean, I think one of the there are several factors, and I don't know that I could say for sure one of the factors is the biggest, but one is the strength of the cartels, particularly south of our border, that are engaged in moving trafficking victims across the border. I think the open border is probably a factor in it as well. That ongoing crisis on the border pulls resources to dealing with that crisis that could have otherwise be used to stopping some of this trafficking. That's not the only cause, but it's one cause. I think lack of public awareness is another one, and that's why we're putting so much emphasis on educating the public that human trafficking does exist. It's significant and it's occurring all around us, and we just need to be vigilant so that when we see something that is actually a clue, we notice it and we take steps. And again, I would remind viewers that they can go to the Attorney General's website, the Attorney General of Kansas, and click on Victim Services, and then there's information regarding human trafficking and where people can report. They don't have to be certain. You don't have to be a criminal investigator, but if you see something that seems suspicious, you can report it there, and then others will follow up.
As far as policies, what policies do you think can be put in place at the state level that haven't been looked at yet? And are there any plans to introduce legislation next year?
We've just got these two new statutes that were passed, and so I think this year and they took effect on July 1st. So this year we'll implement those statutes. We may have some opportunities to prosecute, or counties may have opportunities to prosecute under the redefined crime of human smuggling. And then I think we assess at that point, okay, what worked? What more do we need to do? This is an ongoing challenge and an ongoing project dealing with this crime of human trafficking.
Chris, thank you again. And that was your look inside Kansas politics. If you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at @InKansasPolitics and on Facebook. Just search Inside Kansas Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News and check ksnt.com/inside-kansas-politics for past episodes. If you have a story you want Kansas state legislators to hear or topics you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at ikp@ksnt.com. We'll see you here same time, same place. Have a good day.